Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports, the New Year's edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Wishing you all a happy new year as we kick 2020 out the door and bring 2021 in, and I know everybody's happy about that. We'll talk about sports today, all the home teams, the New Orleans Saints, the New Orleans Pelicans, the Tulane Green Wave, and also the LSU Tigers. We'll also look at the national championship. To break it down for us, one of the best we have in the city, Chris Hagan of Fox 8 Sports is our guest. Chris, welcome to the show. Good to have you as always. And Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, man. Good to be here and always glad to. I really love this set, by the way.
Really
like every time I watch the show, I'm like, that looks really good.
Yeah, it is. And again, I'm going to get them to turn us around so we'll see the dome one day. But I guess we'll wait till the golf is finished over as our neighbors. We were talking about before the show, speaking of 2020, man, I tell you what, a lot of us are ready to get this year out, let the new year come in. And it's been so different for those that cover sports. I mean, you've always been on the road, okay? You know, whether you're going to cover a basketball game, a football game, and I was surprised when you told me you haven't been to a Saints game this year.
I have not been to a Saints game, and it's weird because there hasn't been, I guess, the same normal the activity that we usually do, like you said, going on the road and going to games. At parts of the summer, it felt slow because nothing was really starting up. But then once things got started, I mean, with COVID and just injuries and a weird year for a lot of teams, like it feels like there's breaking news all the time. So it went from like really slow in the summer to this is a lot really quickly in the fall. But it's been fun and it's certainly been interesting, and I think it's giving a bit of a different perspective on how sports and the real world kind of blend.
Well, and also, again, and I don't want to say the need for sports, but the need for sports. That respite for people to be able to get away from everyday life, to be able to, again, enjoy a competition, whether it's on the collegiate level or on the professional level. Again, some people, again, high school level. We just finished high school football championships. But it's an opportunity for people to be able to enjoy, to be entertained. But, I mean, again, we've seen COVID-19 affect so many leagues going forward. Look, the NBA did it right in the bubble. The NFL has pushed through this deal. College football, we're about to get through the college football season. I don't know about college basketball.
It's tough.
And I'll be interested to see what happens with the NBA as we really get into the meat of the season as well, with still, again, the early administering of the vaccines.
Yeah, you talk about the need for sports and entertainment, but also just economically.
Right.
I mean, what we have with sports employs so many people, from athletes, coaches, staff members, in-house media, concession workers, stadium workers, and then in part our jobs hinge on it because there's got to be something for us to cover. Right. So you love to see sports able to push through it, and hopefully as we get closer to summer of 2021, we inch back to being normal, but also be safe.
Yep, no doubt. In high school football, a little bit of surprise this time around with no New Orleans teams bringing home a championship, huh?
Yeah, and they had some tough matchups. I was happy to see St. Charles Catholic fight like they did, and that game went into the fourth quarter. De La Salle close to getting their revenge, just a little bit short, but I think that's a team. I don't know what they do, but they constantly reload with these outstanding running backs. I think they'll be back. And Edna Carr, A.J. Samuel's a sophomore quarterback. He is one of the best. I know we talk a lot about Arch Manning and what he can do, but in that same class of 23, A.J. Samuel is going to be a name to keep an eye on as he grows. Sophomore quarterback had a great year. Carr, I'm going to say it, they're going to be back in the championship game next year, probably the year after that too. That's just how they do.
Of course, before we jump into the Saints, talk a bit about Fox 8. Between the app, of course, your blog, and of course all the great programming you guys have.
Yeah, the Final Play app. We've got the Final Word feature where you can submit questions for us to answer using where we use those questions on our podcast and our broadcast. My Extra Point Fantasy Football blog is there. I'll be wrapping that up actually a little bit later today. We've got obviously game plan on Wednesday nights. Sundays we have the Fox 8 Live tailgate previewing Saints games. Sunday night the Final Play. Monday, the Black and Gold Review Show. Tuesday, our Roundtable Fox 8 Overtime Show. So we are always busy. It's good to keep putting out content.
And all eyes will be on Fox 8 this weekend for the Saints Carolina, and of course peeking at the other games as the Saints are trying to get the #1 seed. We'll get into that now. Let's talk first of all about what happened on Sunday against Minnesota. 52-33 winners over the Vikings. Saints are now 11-4, NFC South champions for the fourth consecutive year. It starts and ends with Kamara's performance of 6 rushing touchdowns. Talk a bit about it.
Well, I'd be remiss as a fantasy football guy if I didn't mention 57 fantasy points from Alvin Kamara. Talk about a Christmas gift. But he was outstanding, career high in rushing yards. That's what happens when I think, one, your offensive line dominates like they did against Minnesota, because that's not the Minnesota defense of years past.
True.
And two, the best sign that I saw in that game against Minnesota was that Alvin Kamara looks fresh and healthy. And he's been on injury reports quite a bit during the middle of the year with a kind of lingering foot issue that's caused him to miss a couple practices or be limited in a couple. But he's always played. But he comes out, tops 20 carries, career high in rushing yards and 6 touchdowns, including some tough goal line carries. Had some took some hard hits, did some hard running between the tackles. That's a great sign that going into this postseason, he is not fatigued, and he's a guy that you can turn to carry your offense when you need him to.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'll take it a step further. To me, for the Saints to be successful in the playoffs, they have to run the football. And I know they get away from it a little bit too much. But there's got to be a discipline there on the part of Sean Payton with his play calling. Breeze, again, as he's looking at that defense, use Latavius Murray, use Kamara again in the running game, and allow this offensive line to be physical. I think they're at their best, especially early in a game, where you allow them to be physical, get out there, get in the running game, and then slowly kind of bring the passing game back into the plays.
I think the key is balance. And, look, I don't envy Sean Payton and that offensive staff, because it can't be easy trying to game plan week to week when you haven't had Michael Thomas most of the season. You deal with some missing guys like Traquan Smith. Your offensive line is being shuffled. I think James Hurst had his first start at left guard. You had Teron Armstead miss a game or two because of COVID. It's not easy to constantly move all those pieces around and put together a game plan. Not to mention Drew Brees missing a couple of games.
Right.
And so I think not only does their success start with running the ball, but with balance. And I think one of the best examples of that was probably Detroit. They got down early, but were able to stick with the run, and then things opened up with the play action and the pass down the field. I think with Taysom Hill, teams were just able to stack the box a little bit more. I know Drew Brees hasn't had his best year statistically or aesthetically getting the ball down the field, but with Drew Brees in the game, there still is the threat of getting the ball down the field, especially in the intermediate level, not necessarily deep shots, but that 10 to 15 yard range downfield where He likes to work those dig routes and some of those crossing over routes. I think that is where this Saints offense is best. We saw it against Detroit. They looked really good against Tampa, in Tampa. There aren't a ton of outstanding offensive performances, but I think the potential is there. If they can get healthy, this can be a very complete team.
Yeah, I would throw Nick Easton in there on that offensive line as well, because let's face it, he's been kind of moving back, substituting back and forth with Cesar Ruiz, who's had an iffy kind of first year at that guard position. And not having him has hurt this team. Not having him has hurt the team. But again, Hurst was a really good pickup. Missed the first 4 games because of suspension, because of PEDs. But after that, everything they've asked him to do, he's been able to do it and do it very well.
Yeah, and that's the story of this team. And Malcolm Jenkins said it earlier in the year. The similarities between New Orleans and Philadelphia. He said we're 2 locker rooms that everybody adopts the mentality of you have to prepare like you're going to play, and prepare like you're going to start. And at times, whether it's been the offensive line like we talked about, whether it's been, the Atlanta game where Patrick Robinson goes down, and I believe P.J. Williams had to step in there, and P.J.'s on Julio Jones for a lot of the day. Like, a lot of guys have stepped up in a lot of different positions and been able to get the job done. And I think that's huge for this team that has dealt with so many injuries. You're hard-pressed to find another NFL team that could weather quarterback, receiver, offensive line, linebacker, defensive backs, all being injured at multiple times of the year and still be in a position to finish 12-4.
Which leads me to my next question, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We've seen wide receivers, again, go down. We know Michael Thomas won't be back until the start of the playoffs. Traquan Smith has been out. They've had to bring in guys from, obviously, the practice squad. Little Jordan Humphrey getting play. Johnson getting some play as well. This week, going into this game, it is an important game for seeding. Do you rest players going forward that are injured, or do you try to rush them back for this particular game? Another guy on the defensive end, Marcus Williams. Is this a situation where Peyton kind of stays with what he's done so far, where, again, he's looking at the big picture rather than, again, just one game? Or is this game so important that you play those players?
I think you play them. I mean, if the number 1 seed is on the table, you got to play them. You got to give yourself the best chance to win. That said, I don't know if you kind of scoreboard watch or peek at halftime or keep an eye on what's happening with Green Bay and Chicago and see what's happening and maybe make a personnel decision there. But I think you want to have your playmakers and your guys active and ready to go. And if something happens where you're playing with a lead, Green Bay's winning and you're not having a chance at that 1 seed or whatever's happening where you can maybe lock yourself into the 2, maybe you make some personnel decisions there. But I think you've got to have your guys ready to go and ready to win this game because we have seen some crazy stuff in this league.
Yes.
You would hate for Green Bay to misstep and the Saints to have a shot at the 1 seed, and then all of a sudden they drop onto Carolina that there's no way they should lose. I mean, we've seen the Jets win a couple games lately here. Teams play well and pull some upsets, and you don't want to see that now with so much on the line. Especially,
again, going against a division opponent, where, again, I think a lot of the fan base may be overlooking this game, looking right to the playoffs, saying Carolina's a win. Well, not necessarily. They're going to come out, again, go back to the first Carolina game. If they know the offense inside out, even though, again, it's a new system with them, having Brady there, they understand the offense, and they understand what's going on the defensive side of the ball. And look, this is a different defense going into this Carolina game now with losing Quan Alexander. To me, the biggest change in this defense, where this defense really took off, was when they inserted Quan Alexander in, and he was able to team along with Demario Davis, and it gave them a lot more flexibility at that linebacker position, do a lot more things. They don't have another player like that on this roster. Anzalone, Bond, the rookie, Ellis from last year. None of those guys, I think, can step in and do what Quan Alexander's been able to do.
Yeah, and Carolina's a team that they've played some good teams pretty tough at times. Their record doesn't show a team that's wildly successful, but I think they can sense that they're close. Obviously, they've got to shore up some of the key positions, offensive line, maybe at linebacker a little bit in your secondary, but like they're a talented team, and the personnel's been good enough with Teddy Bridgewater to put up points at times. You talk about the linebacker position for the Saints and missing Quan Alexander. I think the biggest thing in terms of facing Carolina is Carolina's a really good team at using their running backs in the passing game, whether that's been Mike Davis most of the year or Christian McCaffrey. Curtis Samuel's another guy that kind of plays and makes a lot of catches around the line of scrimmage. It can make get the yardage after the catch. So I think you've got to have sure tackling around the line of scrimmage. You've got to have speed around the line of scrimmage, and I think that's what Quan Alexander brought. I loved him, Demario Davis, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson all out there flying around and making tackles behind the line of scrimmage. And so I think that's what you miss, because Quan was definitely a playmaker and a sure tackler and a guy that could really pressure opposing offenses. So that's going to be a challenge, not just for Carolina, but for whoever they face in the playoffs as well.
I agree. And I think you hit it on the nail on the head. You talk about C.J. G.J., you talk about Quan Alexander and Davis. All of a sudden, that second level, a tremendous amount of speed on the field for them. You lose that. Now, again, Anzalone's a fast player. He's just not as good as Quan Alexander. Quan Alexander's a playmaker, and he proved that from the time, again, that he stepped on the field for the Saints, and that's going to be missed. And then, again, you look at it going forward. Next year, $13.4 million contract. The following year, $13.5 million contract. Now, none of that money's guaranteed. Now, coming off an Achilles tendon injury, you wonder if the Saints are going to be able, first of all, afford him, if there'll be a way to maybe to rework that contract to keep him around, because he's exactly what this team has lacked. Again, we've been saying it for years. That other linebacker that has speed and goes sideline to sidelines, he proved, again, very valuable for this team.
He is, but it's going to be tough. You hate to see it happen to a guy like Quan because he's been through it so much. And so whether you're able to restructure it or not, whatever you have in terms of money and a contract going with Quan Alexander going forward, in the back of your mind, and really not even in the back of your mind, but on the forefront, is like, is he going to make it through the season?
Right.
And when the Saints traded for him, everybody said it was like, as long as he stays healthy, that is a tremendous acquisition. Tears his Achilles. But this is after torn ACL in Tampa, torn pectoral in San Francisco.
Right.
This is a guy that has struggled to stay healthy, and I don't know whether it's – Sean Fazan and I talked about it on our latest podcast. I don't know whether it's genetic makeup, just your soft tissue just isn't up to the position you play or as physical as you play. I don't know what it is, but it is a legitimate thing, and it's a part of him as a player that he's got durability issues. Like you said, I think he comes back from it. He's a hard worker and a heck of a player on the field, but you got to get him out there. And so you have to take that into consideration with whatever you have with Quan going forward. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe you go to free agency if we're talking big picture in the offseason and look for it probably have to be a budget pickup because of where they are cap-wise. Everywhere else on this roster, it is a nightmare. Or you go into the draft and try and get another one if you don't see Zach Bond improving. So it's certainly something to be addressed. I'm just not sure if Quan's the guy because he's got to stay healthy.
Yep. How do they counteract not having Quan Alexander now? Is it going to be another defensive back that'll be on the field now, again, which we saw really before Quan got here? Or are they going to use more Anzalone? Will we see a Zach Bond who has not played or an Ellis who has really not played a lot? Are you going to put them in a situation in the playoffs where it's a must-win? I kind of doubt that Peyton's going to have that kind of confidence in these two young guys.
Yeah, I think it's more of an Anzalone situation. It kind of depends on the opponent. I could see going up against the Rams, you'd probably want another linebacker like Anzalone in there because I think the Rams are going to go pretty power run. They use... From what I've seen, I believe the Rams go to tight end a little bit more than others. I believe Washington could be similar because they like to pound the ball with Antonio Gibson if you matched up with them. Maybe if you play a team like Seattle that uses a couple more 3 wide receiver sets, maybe you go defensive back. It just depends on the opponent. The Saints have been no stranger to using 3 safety packages, and I think they like that a lot.
Yes.
But with Quan Alexander, you didn't necessarily have to do that. And I think that's what helped stop the run in every part of the field, but especially in the red zone, Quan was huge for this team.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And then, of course, you've got a situation Marcus Williams now injured, which, again, could hurt you in terms of 3 safeties because you may have to use P.J. Williams as your free safety. So, again, hoping to be a little bit more healthier going into the playoffs, but it is what it is as far as this game this week. As far as the draft goes, and we talked a little bit about it before we came on air today, Ruiz has struggled at the guard position. Again, was supposed to come in, play the center position. McCoy has pretty much solidified himself as a pretty good center in the NFL. I question that move from the beginning of moving a guy after 1 year that played pretty well, and then putting Ruiz, as a rookie with in that center position, which is a tough position. Bond has done nothing for this team this year except for maybe special teams. Troutman has been the best player, again, as far as this year, and Stevens didn't even make the team. So, again, when you look at the draft in terms of instant impact, not a lot of instant impact like we, again, have been spoiled over the last few years with the draft.
Yeah, and that's been a bit disappointing. You certainly wanted to see Cesar Ruiz make his impact, and Sean Payton wasn't shy about it draft night. They envisioned him starting. And the book is far from closed on him. I think there's still a long way to go, and he can improve. And it was such a weird offseason. But at the same time, Peyton said when they drafted him, and then all the guys they drafted, they picked based on how do we feel like they will learn. We feel like these guys would be the quickest learners because you have to take into consideration we're not going to have rookie OTAs and mini camp and all these other times in the offseason to get together and get on the field. So been a bit disappointing, but I think it'll work out, hopefully, just because you're going to need those rookie contracts to step up and play given their cap situation.
Is it a byproduct of, again, what we're seeing in a COVID-19 affected season with maybe not seeing these players be, I guess, as an integral part of what they're doing? Troutman has really played well. Look, I'll be honest with you. I thought Easton, when he has been in, has played better than Ruiz.
Yeah, Easton's been a huge part of this team. That was a contract and a signee that a year ago we were kind of questioning, and now it's like, where would they be without him? Simply because they've had to shuffle a lot of guys around on that offensive line. Look, I think the adjustment period, I would put a lot of it on COVID and not being able to pick it up. And the Saints' offense is so complex and so precise, such a precision-based philosophy that I think it is difficult to pick up. And you listen to the tight ends talk about it, and they will say they have to be almost as knowledgeable as a quarterback in terms of learning. So kudos to Troutman for finding his way in the middle of the season and making an impact. But it is a tough year to pick things up. So ideally, you learn on the fly. And look, whether they've been perfect or not, they've been good on the field, good enough for this team to win 11 games, hopefully 12, and I think that's something to build on for these guys learning on the fly. The
interesting thing is, and look, I don't want to just just put it in this context, but Troutman's coming from a small school and was expected to take longer to be able to acclimate himself to an NFL offense, whereas Ruiz and Bond both come from big-time programs. And they have kind of sputtered in terms of again, their ability to be able to play at a high level in the NFL. Again, we'll see how that plays out. It's the long game when you're looking at a draft pick. So again, we'll see how that kind of plays out. Look, Ruiz is getting valuable playing time right now. That's only going to help him down the line.
It's been different with Ruiz just because the Saints have really nailed it with offensive lineman picks. You talk about Ramczyk coming in and was like playing like an all-pro by the time he had a couple games under his belt. Obviously, Eric McCoy stepped in and did an excellent job as well. And so you expected kind of Ruiz. It was a big standard to live up to, like our rookies start and our rookies perform well. So it's tough in that regard. I don't think it's on a lack of effort or anything. I just think it was a tough year. Not to mention he missed a chunk of training camp injured, which this wasn't the year to do that either. So
that's true.
I think there's plenty of time for him to improve.
Let's talk about the weekend. Of course, big weekend now with the Saints at Carolina, Green Bay at Chicago, and Seattle at San Francisco, all vying for the number 1 seed. Your thoughts?
Well, it's a weird year, and San Francisco is one of those teams, if I start there, that is just a bit unpredictable, and Seattle has been as well after Russell Wilson was on like a blistering pace to throw 1 million touchdowns. He's kind of cooled off. But Saints fans got to be rooting for Seattle because they need Seattle to win to initiate that 3-way tie for the Saints to have a chance at the number 1 seed. Green Bay at Chicago. Chicago's played really well. They have something on the line, too, in terms of playoffs.
Yes.
So you're hoping that they can pull out a miracle and do something that really no one's done besides Tampa one game, and that's stop Aaron Rodgers. I do think the Saints get the job done, but again, you just it's not in your hands at this point, and that's what makes it tough about dropping that game at Philly.
Yes, no doubt. If there is a team in the NFC or teams in the NFC that you fear, who are they?
I would say the first team that I kind of fear, but not really because I don't fear their offense, would be Washington. I think their defense is outstanding. That defensive line has the potential to do the kind of damage that Minnesota did in the playoffs a year ago, and play that bully ball and push Drew Brees' pocket, won't allow him to step up, and that's how they've really limited teams passing the ball. They're one of the best pass defenses because of that pass rush. They don't have to load the box to stop the run either. That's a scary team, but again, don't fear their offense. Alex Smith is banged up. Dwayne Haskins is gone, which is another topic that's ridiculous. So I don't fear them as much, but the Rams are one with Aaron Donald and that defense that I somewhat fear. As well as they've played, they still are good to drop a stinker on offense, like dropping a game to the Jets, dropping a game to the 49ers. They sputter on that side of the ball at times, but that defense with Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald can be a real team that can give the Saints trouble. Those would be the ones I fear the most. They've beaten Chicago, and they would get them at home, and I think the Saints match up with them pretty well from what we've seen. Plus, they would probably have Michael Thomas and a better group of receivers for this matchup, so I think they could get the job done. But those would be my three, I suppose, mainly because of their defense.
Saints at Carolina, who do you like?
I like the Saints. I think they're motivated. They looked good against Minnesota, and I think they finally got the juice and the momentum back they needed to make a strong push into the postseason. Chris
Hagan is our guest from Fox 8 Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. We come back. We'll talk about the LSU Tigers, Tulane Green Wave. We'll also get into the New Orleans Pelicans. We'll also get Chris's thoughts on the national championship. All that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Don't go anywhere.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest tonight, Chris Hagan of Fox 8 Sports. We turn our attention to the LSU Tigers. They finished the season 5-5 with a 53-48 win over the Ole Miss Rebels. They have chosen not to go to a bowl as part of, again, the ongoing investigation into the program, self-imposed restrictions on the program. But the big news is, again, all the staff changes that we've seen over the last week and a half. Bo Pelini is out. Bill Bush is out. Bill Johnson is out. On the defensive side, Scott Linehan is said to be out, but again, as of right now, he's still in the building, supposedly. Steve Ensminger has retired. Both Bill Johnson and Steve Ensminger will be analysts for this team going forward, which means new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and some new position coaches, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Your thoughts on the wholesale changes we've seen?
Well, I think if there was a year to do it, it was this year.
Right.
You've got a ton of talent. We've seen the young talent on offense is really exciting, from running back to Keyshawn Boutte at receiver to whoever you go at quarterback. I think they're good there, but you want to make sure you capitalize on it. You've got a lot of talent defensively. You've got one of the top safeties in the country in Sage Ryan coming in. You'll have Derek Stingley and Eli Ricks, who are the best cornerback duo in the SEC. And you've got some talent on the defensive line that I think you can work with. So you want to make sure you capitalize on it. And so I think you find out right now that if something's not working, this is the time to fix it, and this is the time to get better. And if nothing else, Orgeron has learned in his time at LSU that don't be afraid to pull the trigger and make a change. Matt Canada, don't keep forcing it. Didn't work out, get a new guy in, look what happens.
Right.
Defensively, Bo Pelini didn't work out. Don't keep forcing it. I know they had some better-ish moments at the end of the year, but there were still a lot of yards bled all over the field that they can't keep giving up. So fix it. Fix it, and don't waste the talent, because if you don't, it's okay to have – it's really not okay to have a year like they had.
No,
but if you're going to have it, don't risk repeating it.
Right.
Because I think what you did with the national championship and the potential you showed as a program is good enough to get you another top 5 recruiting class, but another subpar 5-5 or 500 in the SEC type of year isn't going to get it done. And if it starts hurting you on the recruiting trail, it will start affecting you for years to come as well. And LSU can't afford to slip up.
I would agree. How difficult will it be for Ed Orgeron, who I got to believe is on a hot seat right now, okay? I mean, again, even though, we'd think that most guys that win a national championship have some rope here. Based on this particular season, I don't think that he's going to have the type of leeway that most coaches would have. I mean, they're already putting him in the same breath right now with Gene Chizik.
Yeah, the Gene Chizik comparisons came quickly.
How difficult is it going to be able to get the best out there in terms of coordinators and coaches to be able to come to LSU with maybe a possibility of only being one and done?
I don't think it'll be difficult to get them to come. I mean, they see the talent they have to work with. They see the potential.
Yes.
They see LSU going from a team that fired Les Miles in 2016, struggled in 17, 10-win New Year's Six Bowl game in 18, and the national championship in 19. That's not a long process from firing a head coach that had been there for a decade to getting back to the top of the sport. So I think they know that the potential is there. You just got to bet on yourself. If you come in and do your job, you'll be good, and you can go. Like Joe Brady came in as a passing game coordinator, as an NFL offensive coordinator now.
Yes.
If you come in and do your job, you're good. You can stay at LSU. You can get a raise. You can become a $2.5 million coordinator like Dave Aranda if you do your job.
Right.
And then you can go be a head coach at Baylor if you do your job.
Yes.
So I don't think the risk is potentially getting fired after a year. If you don't do your job, that's just going to be what it is. But that's the decision that Ed Orgeron has to make, because if not, his job is going to be on the line. And the comparisons to Gene Chizik, they're tough, but Orgeron's going to be as good as his coordinators. And we saw that with the national championship year compared to what they looked like with Matt Canada. So he's got to go out and hire the right guys to capitalize on this potential.
Yeah. Let's talk offense first. First of all, Steve Ensminger, I think, kind of gets the short end of the stick here, based on what he had to work with this year. I mean, when you're talking about guys in Miles Brennan who look really good in his first couple games, but again gets injured. Not a lot of experience there, but no experience with again, freshman quarterback coming in. But at the same time, there was almost a feeling of again, you needed a change there. Ensminger, again, a true Tiger, did everything for this particular program as a player and as a coach. What do you think they're looking for as an offensive coordinator? And then your thoughts on Ensminger.
Look, if Ensminger would have stayed as the offensive coordinator, I wouldn't have had an issue. I thought Ensminger was a tremendous play caller. I definitely think Joe Brady helped in play design and kind of, I guess, pushing it into where football is headed. But a lot of that was also based on Joe Burrow's ability to run. And I know Scott Linehan was brought in to be a red zone guy. They didn't have a Joe Burrow. And what Joe Burrow brought you in the red zone was the ability to run, something else that the defense had to account for. You saw it in the national championship game against Clemson, that gutsy call to run a quarterback draw near the end of the second quarter and help them get into the end zone. So I don't think Insminger was the problem, especially when you consider what we don't consider a lot is that the offensive line was just about brand new. You lost your starting quarterback very quickly, and then we're dealing with freshmen at every level, from running backs you'd never heard of, freshman wide receivers, young guys on the offensive line, and freshmen at quarterback. I thought Steve Insminger did a great job play calling, designing an offense to try and take care of his guys and get them into the best situation to succeed. He did everything but go out there and throw the interceptions that TJ Finley did and make the mistakes that some of the young guys did. Not his fault. So offensively, I do think they're looking for a guy that will keep LSU trending in the right direction. In terms of offense, when's the last time you said, with Miles Brennan, yeah, they can come out and throw for 350. That's no problem, and they should be able to. That's what you need in an offensive coordinator. I just think you've got to do your due diligence, and I like that Insminger's staying on as an analyst because he can be kind of the transition guy to, yes, this is similar to what we were doing enough for where we don't need wholesale change and we're going to confuse the younger guys, but also I do like his ideas of how to push this forward and put our guys in the right position to succeed.
Defensively, Pelini comes in with a 4-3, going from a 3-4. Some of that was, again, not having the opportunity to be able to install your defense. The other part of it is not having the players who play that defense. What do you now? Again, we've already heard Ogeron say he wants a 4-3. Is it going to be a 4-3 coordinator?
I think so. He wants a 4-3 because I think that's what he's most comfortable with, and it gives him probably a little more ability to be hands-on with it. And like you said, you saw they didn't have necessarily the personnel to run a really successful 4-3. So with Pelini as your coordinator, I imagine you start recruiting the personnel, but you don't want to go back to a 3-4 when you spent a year recruiting some bigger ends and some guys who can play inside a little more for your 4-3 and then switch back. The names that are put around LSU at defensive coordinator, maybe a Derek Mason coming from Vanderbilt, runs a 4-3. So I wouldn't be surprised if they stuck with that because you've got the personnel for it, and if Ogeron's most confident with it, okay, but you need better safety play. Ideally, you get that with guys getting older, more experienced, hopefully, and learning the system a little bit better. I think it's a lot to ask a guy like Sage Ryan to come in and save the defense at safety, but could help. So I think that there are areas you have to improve, but I'd expect them to stick with a 4-3.
A criticism of the former coaching staff, it trended older, not enough African Americans on the staff. Do you think that will change with this new staff?
It could. I think Corey Raymond being there as a person of color that has been a longtime staple and one of the most important parts of not just the defense, but the program in terms of recruiting, especially the state of Florida. I think that is a positive, but I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in some more minority candidates. You had guys like Dennis Johnson, who's Baylor now, I believe.
Yep, DC.
So I think that could certainly play a role, and definitely if you bring in a guy like Derek Mason, that would help. I do think, though, it's about getting the best minds to, one, on offense, build on what you have and the ability to move the ball down the field in chunks, and defensively to stop the spread. I think Pelini was a guy that if you line up in an I formation and a pro offense and run it right at him, sure, Pelini's defense probably played pretty well. But Dave Aranda had that unit ready to stop the spread with his speed on that side of the ball. That's not what we saw this year.
Has the narrative changed now? I mean, it was a very toxic situation around this program with so many guys defecting, etc. Have they gotten to the point where Ogeron has kind of changed the narrative a bit with the way they played the last two games, beating Florida, beating Ole Miss, holding on to that top 5 recruiting class? Have they stabilized the program in some form or fashion? Or will we know that only after the new coaches come on board?
I think the narrative is helped by the fact that it was such a weird year and that they finished strong. It's a very what have you done for me lately kind of thing. And, yeah, beating Auburn would have been nice. Beating Bama would have been nice, was never going to happen. But beating Florida, who is a rival that, in my opinion, is just about up there with those in LSU's schedule, I think that helps a lot. And I do think when you kind of sit back and you look at the college football playoff and the fact that it's going to be Bama and Clemson, and it's like status quo, and LSU is still, I think, miles better than a lot of other programs, I don't think this year hurts LSU a ton as long as you make the right hires and as long as you get back to winning competitive games. And I think what we saw at the end of the year, and I don't want to throw too much shade, but you got some of the guys out of the locker room that maybe didn't want to be there.
Right.
And you saw what happened, and they showed a lot of fight in those last 2 games.
They did.
I think that was the right way to end to have success going forward.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Alabama and Clemson. We'll go to Tulane after this, but let's talk first of all the Sugar Bowl. Number 2 Clemson against number 3 Ohio State. Talk about that game. Some people believe that Ohio State was not worthy to be in this game. How do you feel about it?
Look, I think Ohio State is probably one of the top 4 teams.
I would agree with that.
But the Big Ten should have been punished for their buffoonery, like preseason and wanting to not have a football season, but then seeing everybody else have it and realizing, wow, we're going to really keep our conference out, and then playing it. And then Ohio State's not going to play enough games to qualify for the Big Ten title game. Then they changed the rule to get Ohio State in. Like, they put everything together to make sure Ohio State got in, and the College Football Playoff Committee said, you know what, we'll let them in. Again, think they're a top 4 team, but were there some other deserving? Yes. But it's not Texas A&M.
Right.
I did not want to see Texas A&M lose to Bama again by 20-plus points again. And I think Texas A&M blew it when they really struggled against LSU. So I think Ohio State, 50% worthy, but I think Clemson beats them.
Was there an argument for Cincinnati?
In terms of like playing a full schedule, possibly. I don't know, man. It's such a weird year.
Tough.
I just want to see you get, and it's hard because a lot of Power 5 teams don't want to put some of those Group of 5 teams that can beat them on their schedule.
That's right.
So that's always going to make it tough to get them into the playoff, but eventually it's got to happen.
Right. Based on this year, I think they got the right 4 teams.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you could say, is Ohio State deserving based on the shenanigans that happened in the Big Ten? Probably not. But again, I'm with you. I like Clemson over Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl. How about Alabama, Notre Dame? I think it's pretty a foregone conclusion. Alabama's the best team in the nation right now.
They are. Their defense is a little bit suspect, but I don't know many defenses that are going to stop Alabama. I mean, we saw it in Alabama, Florida. What could have been a close game really wasn't, just because Florida couldn't get the stops. Maybe Clemson's defense has enough to get the stops, but Alabama will win in a shootout, if anything, but I do think they've got what it takes to beat Notre Dame pretty good.
Alabama, Clemson in the national championship, if it turns out that way. Your thoughts?
I'm going to go with Clemson. I think they're hungry. I think they are pretty motivated after what happened against LSU. Not a big Dabo Swinney fan, but I do think he's an excellent motivator, and he will have his team convinced that the world hates them and they will come out and play with their hair on fire. And I think Trevor Lawrence wants to end his college career on the right note.
Yeah. Let's talk about Tulane. They end the season 6-6, but again 6-5 in the regular season, losing to Nevada in the Idaho Potato Bowl 38-27. Just your overall thoughts on the season as it unfolded.
I think it was one of Willie Fritz's best turnaround jobs to go from some really disappointing early and mid-season losses to finish the year strong how they did and really put together a pretty dominant win over a program like Memphis. I think that says a lot. Again, it's kind of like a woulda, coulda, shoulda, just in a different form. I think in 2019, they started fast, was it 5-1, and then just really had the bottom fall out, finished strong winning the bowl game, but they just didn't beat the programs I feel like they should have. This year, we could be having a totally different conversation about a totally different team in a different bowl game if you don't allow Navy to come back, you hold off Tulsa, and you win some of those games that were very winnable. SMU as well.
Right.
These are games that they finished, 9-2?
Right. I mean, you got a 9-win season. You win those 3 games. You should not have lost to Navy, and you had 2 top 25 teams on the ropes in overtime. And the 2 games that you really – so, again, you go woulda, coulda, shoulda, Jim Mora, but, I mean, you're that close to being a 9-win team.
And I think that hopefully that motivates them, because Willie Fritz has seen it enough. This isn't the first year they've had some disappointing losses like that. Crazy fluke losses on field goals and pick sixes and all kinds of things that shouldn't happen. I think he's tired of it, and I think a lot of these players are tired of it that have been there for years. Hopefully this motivates them to finish, and I think they've got the quarterback who can help them start to finish as he continues to grow.
I think that's the key. I think the hardest thing to get in college football consistently is a very good to great quarterback. This kid, just based on what we've seen the freshman year with Michael Pratt, looks like he's got the it factor. He's got the ability to be a guy that can be a 4-year starter for you, maybe a 3-year starter, maybe possibly going to the NFL. We don't know what Iabetta is yet because he didn't get a lot of chance to play. But you've checked the box now with the quarterback position, and you know you're going to have great skill position players at Tulane just simply because of Louisiana. Running backs, wide receivers. You know, even if you take what's left over with LSU and some of the other big schools that come in and grab, you're still going to have great skill players. Where you've always got to be able to try to maybe go outside the state is offensive and defensive linemen, just like LSU. But again, Willie Fritz has been able to do that consistently. So I think, again, going forward, you like what you have because you have a quarterback and you can build around it.
Absolutely. And Michael Pratt he's a dog, man. I mean, he's a guy that will fight hard. You saw his toughness a lot of times. He took a lot of hits, bounced back up, made some big throws, made some big runs. And that, like you said, it all comes together. When you have a quarterback, you always have a chance. It's the most important position in football for many reasons. And I think we saw them with Tulane. Once he came in and really once he got his footing, and he really went from coming in and kind of game managing against Southern Miss and some of those other games, and we saw him when he had to make the plays with the game on the line, he kind of faltered a little bit, but really in the game against Memphis and some of those others, he really stepped up, and he's going to get even better.
Yeah, I would agree. A change, though, when it comes to the coordinators and at the offensive line position. Chip Long comes in for Will Hall, who moves on to USM to be the head coach there. He takes Cody Kennedy with him, who's the offensive line coach. Supposedly those guys are very, very close. George Barnett comes in from Miami, Ohio. He will coach the offensive line. Now you've got Chris Hampton, who comes back to the team after Jack Curtis was relieved of his duties, which was surprising because Curtis has had a history with Willie Fritz. But, man, Willie Fritz, if it's not working, he is quick to cut. It doesn't matter, again, whether you're tight with him, you've been with him forever. He will move on. He did that with Jack Curtis. Talk about, again, these coaching changes going forward for the Greenies.
Well, defensively, that defense was one of the biggest issues in a lot of those games. I mean, you look at SMU, literally every time Tulane scored, SMU scored on the ensuing drive. That can't happen. And a lot of times it was chunk plays in the passing game that were hurting Tulane. Navy had chunk plays and big pass after big pass, and you're just like, how is this happening? It's 3rd and 7 or something. You know they have to pass this time because they're playing with a deficit, and you got guys running wide open down the field or whatever the case was. They had to do something about the defense to get that shored up. Offensively, whereas you saw, I think, Tulane lean on the run really heavily the first couple of years of Fritz, I think what Will Hall did well was he pushed them to take what the defense is giving you, and if they stack the box, we're going to throw. And if they play too deep and respecting the pass, we're going to run and really mix it up. Get everybody involved. Involve your backs in the passing game. Get your receivers going on jet sweeps. Get creative with the play calling and be aggressive. And I think that's what Tulane has to continue to do. Keep your foot on the gas. Keep pushing. Something we saw them fail to do in the Navy game, and really since then they didn't really look as timid after that. They wanted to keep pressing forward. That's what you've got to have in a coordinator and on that offensive side of the ball.
Also, I think the expectations of the defense this year, okay? The expectations were the defense was going to carry this team, especially with having guys that we know will be playing on Sunday, right? And they just didn't live up to their billing until really late in the season, and even then they were still inconsistent. That's one of the reasons why Jack Curtis ended up, walking the plank here. They go with a guy they're very familiar with Chris Hampton, who was here as a defensive back coach. So obviously there's some familiarity there between head coach coach and now defensive coordinator. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But look, another decent recruiting class for Tulane as well. So again, hopefully they can continue to build on what they have now, and we will see a consistent winner going forward. Look, they got to break through this 6 and 5, 6 and 6. They got to get to the point where, again, they're one of the upper echelon teams in the American, and they're winning 8-9 games a year.
They're the only ones holding themselves back. And I don't say that to be disrespectful.
True.
I'm saying their schedule is winnable. They've proven that. They've beaten top 25 teams now. They've competed and hung to the end with some good offenses and good defenses. But you got to come out and do it consistently. And above all, you just got to finish. That's the only thing that was holding Tulane back is mistakes at the end of games, whether it was offense or defense. Eliminate those and finish. And again, we're talking 7-win minimum. That's got to be it.
Yep.
And you move forward from there, you're talking about 9, and then you're talking about a program that can consistently be one of the upper echelon teams and start to compete for the conference.
Well, look what Billy Napier was able to do over at UL. I mean, again, it turned that program into a consistent winner to the point where, again, SEC teams are coming after him, and he's turning the job down, which I think is mind-boggling for a lot of people. Okay, but
do you want to go to South Carolina?
No, I would not.
Yeah.
No, but I might go to Auburn. Okay,
I might go to Auburn.
I might go to Auburn. Okay, but at the same time, you look at it, a lot of coaches would have jumped.
Yeah.
Okay, he has not. And he's a guy that is, again, when you look at that model for UL, you look at Tulane and you just say, that's the model we should be using. Okay, because the big schools are not going to come here and get everyone. There's a lot of talent in this state to be able to go around to, again, all the major schools.
I think the persistence in staying is what helps Napier get some recruits because they know they've got a coach that probably isn't going to jump, apparently, unless, like, Alabama comes open or Clemson comes open.
Well, some are saying that's what he's holding out for here.
Yeah, and it could be that. Maybe he just really likes Boudin. I don't know.
Right.
But whatever it is, it's getting players in. And I think Willie Fritz has shown that, too. Everything he said and, consistently re-upping his contract that Tulane has shown he's going to be here. I think that helps, and I think that's the model. But you got to keep recruiting well. You got to keep taking advantage of what you got in the state, and Fritz has certainly improved on that just about every year here.
As we are recording this program, the Pelicans are 2-2. They got outclassed by Miami. They got blown out by Phoenix. They played well enough down the stretch to beat Toronto and San Antonio. Look, I can live with the Miami loss because Miami was just in the finals. They were still playing in October. That team is still kind of in a playing mode. A lot of teams that, again, had to sit, didn't have a lot of training camp, didn't have a lot of preseason. You're still kind of going through the growing pains. I like what they did in coming back against San Antonio and Toronto to win those games. Against Phoenix, they reverted back to the Alvin Gentry Pelicans.
The bubble Pelicans.
Right, and the bubble. They were exposed, okay, for again what they have been, and that was the disheartening thing about watching that game. Again, the turnovers, the lack of defense. In the past, what we've seen is this team really attack the paint. A lot of guys settling for outside shots. Didn't seem to have the same enthusiasm that we've seen in the first 3 games. Now, look, it's 4 games in the season. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here, but they've got to be able to play more consistent basketball. Look, they can come back now on this road trip and play well, but Phoenix is a nice team, and that's a good measuring stick for this franchise, considering, again, they're kind of on the same trajectory right now when you're talking about getting young players, trying to build for a future championship.
It is, and it's a weird year in the NBA because you've seen the Bucks blow some teams out. You've seen the Bucks be blown out.
Right.
You've seen the Nets blow some teams out. You've seen the Warriors win a close game in Chicago. You've seen them lose by like 30-plus. There have been a lot of blowouts in the league. The Pelicans are the latest. It comes on national TV. We're more invested in the team, so I think we make it bigger. And like you said, we're only 4 games in. But you are right in the same breath that that's not what you want to see. And for a team that wants to start to hang its hat on defense, that ain't it. And so they've got to be better in that regard. The thing that I think we talked about before the show and the thing that we said last year in the bubble with this team was whoever the coach was, they did not have the personnel to have that dog mentality on defense. I'm talking like Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, like some of these guys that just not only are personally responsible for how they play defense, like a Drew Holiday, but want to be responsible for how their team looks. And they will just absolutely not stand for a lack of effort on that end of the floor, a lack of understanding, a lack of unity.
Yes.
And the Pelicans didn't have that dog. And as well as they might play on the other end, guys like Zion don't have it on defense right now. That's got to get better.
Right.
He said it.
Right.
I think it was after one of the first couple games. They asked what he's going to work on now, or what they're going to work on now, or how they improve. He said defense, more defense. He knows it.
Right.
This team knows it. They definitely know it after that game against the Suns. But it's got to keep getting better.
I agree. It's a byproduct, though, of, again, today's NBA, because you're taking players. He would be a junior right now at Duke, okay? And Coach K would have had his third year with him. He would know how to play defense by now. Okay, he is lost on the defensive end. Same thing with Jackson Hayes. He is lost on the defensive end. And when you have those guys in the game at the same time, it is Olay. So they got to figure that out. So from that standpoint, they've got to get better on defense. They also have to find a scorer. They need some shooting, and that's another big problem with this team right now.
They absolutely need some outside shooting to kind of not only help things spacing-wise, but just to be able to keep pace when you've got a team like the Suns who start burying threes and the Heat who were burying threes. On both ends of the floor, defending the three and shooting it, they have been a little bit deficient, and the best teams in this league are able to shoot from the outside. The Bucks had a huge game the same night as that Suns matchup and went off from the outside. I think that's where a lot of these games could be decided. So they've got to get better in that area, and it's not easy. It's probably not an easy year for development with everything happening on the fly and the way training camp was and whatnot. But they've got to improve in that part of the game. Yeah,
there's no doubt, and it's going to take time. Look, this is a very bad defensive team last year. Even though you've added some different pieces to it, for the most part, they've got to learn how to play defense. And as I said before, without training camp, without preseason, this is going to be more of a longer haul in terms of knowing who this team is. You can only know what the team is after a quarter of the season. You might not be able. You might have to go to the halfway point of the season before you know who you are.
You just want to make sure you're winning some while you're learning who you are, and that's where you want to learn the lessons. I think it was the Spurs game. They didn't finish particularly well. The Spurs just hung around. You were just afraid somebody was going to hit a three and ruin the night for the Pelicans. But I thought that was a win, an ugly finish that they could learn from. The good news is the Suns' loss, as bad as it was, it only counts as one loss, and hopefully you learn from it. But you want to be more competitive, especially when you go up against some of those teams that are making jumps forward like the Suns. That said, the Suns are good.
Yep.
They're going to be good. And we saw what Chris Paul did with that dump of a roster in OKC. The Suns have a lot of young talent.
Yes.
Devin Booker scored 9 points, I think. He had single digits. He didn't have single digits at all last year. The only times he's had single digits in his career, I saw this stat earlier, the Suns never won a game.
Right.
That's how good they are.
No, they are. And look, the contract, $36 million, was a little bit too much for the Pelicans to take on. But Chris Paul, even with this particular roster, man, I'm telling you, he will make the Suns better. And they're going to be a team to be reckoned with down the line, just like the Pelicans down the line as well. Chris, always appreciate you joining us. Happy New Year to you and your family. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night at 10 p.m. on WLAE-TV. So let me break this down for you. Thursday, 1 o'clock on WLAE, 6 o'clock on WLAE, and then, of course, 10 o'clock on Friday nights on WLAE. This week, Glory Days 3 will be on 7 p.m. on Thursday night, following our show on Thursday. If you missed the show on Thursday, you can catch it on Friday on Pelican Sports Television at 9. Also on Pelican Sports Television at 5 o'clock on Saturday. And don't forget about The Deuce, WLAE-TV 2. 10 o'clock on Thursday night, and also Saturday morning at 2 a.m. So a lot of ways to catch the program. You can catch me on the radio, and that is on 106.1 FM. That is 4 to 6 weekdays. You can listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. Our podcast is now available on all your podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it, we're on it. So again, you can check that out there. And as always, want to thank our guests today. Chris Hagan for joining us from Fox 8 Sports. Also the WLA production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Tommy O'Connor, Tommy Failer, and my director, William Hill. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. We'll see you next year for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.